He loved us. This is the title of Pope Francis' new encyclical letter on the human and divine heart of Jesus, released just 3 days ago. He loved us. We hear it from Jesus' lips, and we experience it from his actions. The numerous accounts of his healing works, his welcoming to sinners, having dinner with publicans and with women of ill reputation. We see it in his patience towards the disciples and their very slow learning process. We see that he loved us in the steps that he took to lead the religious leaders of his time to mercy and to a conversion of the heart. We see he loved us in the tears that he shed outside of the walls of the city of Jerusalem. As looking at the city, he cried and said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how many times I have tried to gather your children like a hen that gathers her young under her wings. But you have not heeded the call." He loved us, and we see this through his passion, death, and resurrection, to which we are especially united at the celebration of the Eucharist. He loved us then, he loves us now. This love, which knows no end, was at work throughout the whole gospel. Every word, every action of Jesus is oriented towards that end, love, and what love can do. Because of love, Jesus healed Bartimaeus. And like every other healing that Jesus performs in the gospel, the purpose of the healing is not just to alleviate a physical illness or disability. The work of Jesus is oriented to something greater, to increase faith, to help people encounter the God of life and the love of God that transforms everything. The healing was oriented to touch the heart, not only of the person being healed, but also of the community around that person. So it's clear that Jesus' actions did not only touch the wounds of those who were ill, but that it helped them in their process of recovery from illness to wellness, to also be reintroduced to the life of the community. As you know, physical illness was often attributed to sin. If you were a sinner, you were punished with a physical illness. And this caused a great tragedy for the life of a person who was sick or terribly ill or with a disability. It caused them to be cast out of society. They had no place in society, and they had no place in the practice of religion, as their illness would often also be seen as ritual impurity. So people who were ill, sick, or with disabilities, like Bartimaeus in today's gospel, will definitely be cast out from society and from the religious community. So not being part of the community, Bartimaeus did the only thing he could do. He sat on the roadside and begged. And then he hears the voice of Jesus, or he hears that people are calling out to Jesus, and then he starts shouting, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." Surprisingly, many rebuked him and told him to be silent. The gospel says that following Jesus, that there was a large crowd following Jesus. I don't think Bartimaeus was the only one calling out to Jesus. Have you ever been around a celebrity, at a concert or a special event? Everybody wants to be close to the celebrity. Everybody shouts the name of the person. Nowadays, everybody calls and wants to have a selfie with the celebrity. I'm sure many people were crying out to Jesus, but only Bartimaeus was singled out, rebuked, and asked to be silent. Why Bartimaeus? Well, in the eyes of so many, he was just a blind man on the roadside. His voice had been voided. He had been ignored before. His wishes, his tears, his cries just didn't count. They were not important. He was already on the roadside. Why bother? He's not a member of the community. He's not a member of those who are insiders that can follow Jesus and walk after Jesus. So it's better to rebuke him. The community had already set him apart, had already set him aside, and they condoned this treatment towards him. That's what they had done before. So it was easier just to rebuke him and ask him to be silent. But then, let's see what Jesus does. In the midst of all the noise of so many people calling out to him, he hears the voice of the one who had been ignored and silenced. He sees the man who remained invisible for his own community, who was just a beggar on the roadside, and he calls him and brings him in the middle of the community. Jesus brings this man who had been an exile from his community, and brings it back to the community. And then he restores his sight. This healing of Bartimaeus brings light to this man who was blind, but also it brings light to a community that was blind. Imagine the great lesson as Jesus brings this man from the roadside to the center of the crowd and heals him. Imagine the lesson for those who had rebuked him earlier, for those who had asked him to remain silent. They see that Jesus is doing something different. Jesus brings him back to the community, and as he does that, he calls the community to go back to God, to go back to mercy. Through his action, Jesus is calling the community that they may do what he has done for Bartimaeus, that they may no longer ignore those who are on the roadside and beg for mercy. Jesus' action is compelling the community who are around him to imitate his action, to evaluate how many people they had stigmatized for their illness, how many they have marked as social and ritually impure and unclean, how many were there who were beggars of mercy, and how many they have rebuked and silent. The actions of Jesus are compelling the community to do something different, to change the way in which they have acted in the past. Certainly, the healing of Bartimaeus, like every other healing that Jesus performs, is intended to go beyond that physical healing, to move that person and the larger community to follow the example of Jesus and to do the work of the gospel, so that through our enlightenment by Jesus' actions, we may bring the light of Jesus to others. Certainly, Jesus' actions are always moving towards inclusion, never exclusion, towards love, never hatred, towards justice, never compliance, toward embrace, never rebuke, towards dignity, never humiliation. And this call to the community was true then, and it is true now. If the gospel we read and proclaim and pray with doesn't move us to examine the way we live, the way we move toward inclusion, love, mercy, and justice, if we are not compelled to get out of our blindness, to listen to the voice of the voiceless, to advocate for the innocent, and to bring back those who have been excluded and secluded to the roadside, then we're not different from those who were following Jesus but doing nothing about the children of God. If we learned from Jesus and hear the cry of the needy and see those who remain invisible and call upon those on the roadside and treat them as children of God, then our light, that light of the gospel, will bring sight to the blind. My dear brothers and sisters, who is Bartimaeus today? Who are the people who stand by the roadside and begged for mercy? Who are those that perhaps we as society, or even worse, we as church, the ones walking with Jesus, have rebuked and silenced? Let us think of so many who today sit by the roadside because of their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their citizenship status, their physical or intellectual disabilities. What do the actions of Jesus say to us today? How does the gospel bring light to our current contest a few weeks from a presidential election, in the context of a society that is so polarized and divided? Are we willing to let the words of the gospel compel us and challenge us to follow the actions and the example of Jesus? Or are we going just to continue doing what has been done before, rebuking and silencing others, even as we pretend to walk with Jesus? He loved us, and He loves us today. May we share that love with our words and actions.
Don't forget to follow St. Patrick's on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube. And please join us for any of our live stream masses this weekend. Details are below in the description. God bless you.
Like burning incense, O Lord, let my prayer rise up to you. Like burning incense, O Lord, let my prayer rise up to